If this was a 3D game and you could free roam, and you see that on the camera and go, oh, that's scary, and you walk into the room, Bonnie's just like this in the corner. Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs, the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host, The Toast, Rye Toast, here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, like we always do. We're going to start with a couple Patreon questions, like we've been doing, and then we'll move over to the email. If you want your questions answered in the podcast, you can get them answered at a priority over on the Patreon, or you can send them into freddyfazbearpizzapodcast@gmail.com. That's in the description, copy and paste, because it's a pain to type out. Our first question from the Patreon is Italian Peach, they, them. This is more of a thought than a question. While I was out with friends the other day, somehow the topic of the 501st Legion came up. If you don't know who they are, I don't. They're a massive Star Wars cosplay organization with a pretty strict approval process and detailed set of rules members have to follow. One rule I found especially interesting is that members playing helmeted characters like Mandalorians generally aren't supposed to remove their helmets in public around children. The reason is actually pretty understandable. For very young kids, those characters can feel completely real, and seeing a helmet suddenly come off can genuinely confuse or scare them. To some children, it can look like the character is taking off their head. That immediately made me think about the crying child in FNAF and why he's constantly terrified of Freddy's. Obviously, a lot of this fear comes from the trauma and bullying from his older brother, but there's also that famous scene where he sees William helping somebody into the Springbonnie suit. We don't know exactly how old Crying Child is, but he's clearly very young. Maybe he didn't understand that there were people inside the suits at all. From his perspective, he may have thought he literally saw his father remove and reattach Bonnie's head, which would be horrifying for a child already scared of the animatronics. I know why is the Crying Child always crying isn't exactly the biggest mystery in FNAF lore, but I thought it was an interesting connection between real-world child psychology and how a young kid in the FNAF universe might perceive the Springlock suits. No, honestly, it's a good point to bring up because at the end of the day, we're not directly given the reason why the crying child is, well, crying. We don't know for certain why. There's a lot of pretty, easy to logic your way into theories, and one of them could just be the misunderstanding about what an animatronic suit is. Now, part of me hesitates to say that's true, mainly because of the fact that, the pink bedroom to the right, likely Elizabeth's, has the taken apart mangle in it, which tells me that William Afton is showing them how animatronics work in some fashion. So theoretically, he should know what they are. However, it is still completely possible. Not only is it possible, but arguably likely, that it's just a matter of him not understanding what he's seeing. We already know that there were rumors about this restaurant before anything happened, because they already say that if you stay there overnight, the animatronics will kill you or whatever. That one kid on the walk back says it. So we know that there are rumors circulating, and the idea that the rumors are coming from people misunderstanding how animatronics work, that's pretty fair. It could explain why we have that scene where William is helping somebody put on a suit to show us an example of what's going on, not to mention that happens in a shadowy room. And we know soon after this, Scott Cawthon left that comment in that Game Theory live stream, what is seen in the shadows is often misinterpreted in the eyes of a child or something like that. All of this does line up with the idea that the crying child was just scared of animatronics because he didn't understand how they worked. He thought, people taking them off, people taking them apart, that's them literally killing the animatronics in front of them. So I think it's super valid. I love when a real world thing can be brought into the theory space, or at least it helps to inspire something in the theory space. I think that's a good way to feel good about a theory, is to have that real world connection and having, this cosplay organization, 501st Legion. I've never heard of it before. I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, but it makes total sense that if you are in costume, in a really well-made costume around children, for their benefit, you shouldn't take off a helmet or act in an inappropriate manner near those children who are going to be viewing you as real characters. I mean, it's why at Disney, you're not allowed, the people working at Disney are not allowed to take off their suits like in public. You go into a side room for that. You go into a break room for that. And it makes total sense, right? If a young child who is, 4 or 5 years old, so excited to meet Mickey in real life, jumping up and down, sees Mickey, is super excited, and then the guy playing Mickey takes off the head, and just like Ted, it's just like some guy under there, that's gonna stunt the kid for a while. That kid is never watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse again because he saw Mickey die in front of him and there was a guy underneath. We took our kids to Sesame Place pretty recently, like Sesame Park, I guess technically. I don't remember if it's called Sesame Place. And I remember like two costumes of Bert and Ernie walked by, and my middle child was like over the moon trying to catch up to them. We didn't manage to catch up to them because they went to a side room, but over the moon trying to catch up to them to go meet Bert and Ernie. In that moment, he is fully believing that is the actual Bert and Ernie in the flesh that he gets to now meet. If that worker that like turned around and went, "Hold on, kid," took off a hat and started smoking, like that would ruin it for him. So to bring like that very like known and understandable bit of child psychology into FNAF, where we have these animatronic characters that are like beyond belief. The idea of like being in the 80s and seeing that sophisticated of an animatronic is crazy. But to see that, and then one day, you see an animatronic taking off its head, or somebody taking off its head and adjusting it and putting it back on, or even being locked in the closet where all the spare parts are. Like, if the crying child thinks the animatronics are real characters, think about that fourth night when he's locked in the back room and there's just like animatronic parts all over the place. If he thinks these are real characters, there's a large body in the corner, the heads of the characters he likes mounted on the damn wall, and like guts, the endoskeleton, just guts all over. Like, this is a horror show. This is terrifying if he thinks these are real characters. And maybe that's where some of the bullying from his older brother's coming from. The idea of like, he's trying to, in his own messed up, horrid older brother fashion, trying to like prove to him that the characters are fake or something. I don't know. But it totally tracks with what we know about the crying child for him to think these characters are real. He's got a plushie that talks to him. Why wouldn't he think they're real? Not to mention how we see him in Happiest Day, and even in the cutscenes at the end of FNAF 4, where he's talking to we never see the crying child talk to another spirit. He always talks to like a plushie or something that looks like an animatronic in a way that, like he doesn't see the spirit, he sees the character. That's just what makes sense to his mind. We see the only time you could argue he ever sees another like child spirit that we know of is the end of Happiest Day, where he moves on. At that point, they've already reached out to him. They already got him, So I see that a lot. It's part of the theory I made, I want to say over a year ago now, when discussing like how the crying child works with Golden Freddy. The idea of like the crying child isn't a part of Golden Freddy, but he's following around the spirit within Golden Freddy, because in the afterlife it appears to him as the Golden Freddy plushie. The psychic friend Fredbear play the jingle, right? So I kind of do really like this interpretation, the idea of like, and again, it also then lines up with there are no needed prerequisites for the crying child to die first. If the crying child had something to actually be frightened of, like the death of Charlotte or an MCI, then okay, that kind of gives us what he's afraid of, but why didn't he just tell anybody about it or something like that? Whereas this, it explains remember what you saw and that fear that he has in a way that continues to not need any prerequisites. So the crying child being the first death still lines up super cleanly, where now it's just a matter of he just saw animatronics and thought they were real people. They're not, but that was enough to make him afraid of them. And, whether you think Psychic Friend Fredbear is his imagination, whether you think it's William Afton, whatever you think it is, if you think it's Loop Victim and it's actually, Cassidy reaching out to him, whatever you think it is, the thing that he saw being an animatronic and not an actual murder helps to keep that early. Granted, if you think it's Cassie, it can't be that early, but you know what I mean. So to wrap back to what you said at Time Peach, that I think is probably the most likely answer. You know, it's the thing that it's why he's afraid of everything. It's where that fear is coming from. And it's that fear that leads Michael to pick on him so much. And then that turns into the death of the crying child. Not to say it's the crying child's fault because he was afraid, but like that's where the bullying is coming from. So yeah, thank you for your thoughts on that at Time Peach. Our next Patreon question comes from Terry and they, them. I have a thought with one of your recent podcasts/videos about Roxy and Monty's placement in the new Freddy's band. Doesn't Secret of the Mimic imply the original four was Fredbear, Springbonnie, Monty, and Bub, and then changed to have Chica and Foxy, with them all being Springlocks? Sorry if I worded this poorly. No, that was totally fine, Terry. And yes and no. So and when I made that Roxy and Monty video, it was the idea was that more and more of these characters are being replaced by characters that were made and initially designed by Fiona Murray. Chica, Foxy to an extent, but he's not the Pizzaplex yet. Roxy, Montgomery Gator, these are Fiona Murray originals. Freddy is not. Fredbear's approached MCM to make the Freddy Fazbear Pizzeria, I almost said simulator, prototype. But the designs were sent over, and then like Fiona sent a first draft, and then Fazbear was like, no, you're doing this design. So these were designed by Fazbear. So the original four being Fredbear, Springbonnie, Monty, and Bub, that may or may not have been Fiona's designs. I think it's probably Fiona's designs because I know Edwin has that audio log where he's like, well, I'm not changing them from Fiona's designs. So it's likely them. But two things to keep in mind. One, those are the Springlock suits, while there's already separate prototype animatronics, right? Like there's a Springlock Bonnie, sure, but there's the prototype Bonnie we see on the stand. And then two, the original band, while mostly unknowable, isn't what I was getting at. I was more so getting at characters initially designed by Fiona Murray. So even if the original band was Fredbear, Springbonnie, Monty, and Bub, that I really hesitate to assume that because we see so much Monty merchandise throughout the Pizzaplex with no mention of Fazbear's at all. Sorry, throughout Murray's Costume Manor with no mention of Fredbear's at all. I wonder if Monty was part of the prototype pizzeria deal there. Bub, I have no idea. I could not tell you heads or tails on Bub. But regardless, in that same moment where we have those Springlocks, we have the standees of Chica, Freddy, Bonnie, and Foxy, the original band. So I think if anything, the original four seems to be implied to be Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy. And the Springlock suits are there for some reason that I don't think has a great explanation. That's my general thoughts on it, is that I was more so trying to imply characters were being replaced by ones that Fiona Murray herself had designed, not necessarily going back to the original characters, because it's still technically hard to say as to who those original characters were. But thank you for your question. And we'll move on to, we have one more, and then we move on to the email. So our last Patreon question is from Percy, he, him. I feel like a lot of people who say they prefer the Scottgames over the modern Steel Wool games do so for various reasons, but one of the sentiments I see being talked about a lot in comparison is the eerie, uncanny, and off-putting nature of most of the early games, especially FNAF 1, and how the newer games don't capture it in the same way. While I absolutely love every entry in the FNAF franchise, I think Help Wanted and Secret of the Mimic came the closest to replicating the uncanny nature of early FNAF, but in a 3D space. And fan games such as FNAF Rewritten 87 blend 3D free roam and an early FNAF elements with an uncanny nature near perfectly. If Steel Wool were to try and make a game fully embracing that eerie, haunting nature that came with the early games, but did so while blending it with the modern formula of FNAF, how do you think the game should play out? And what area of the lore do you think could best suit a Scott-style/Steel Wool-style FNAF mashup game? Thank you for your question, Percy. It's a lot to think on. I'm going to stand up because I'm EP. It's a lot to think on. I think I do generally agree with that sentiment. Say what you want about the Scottgames versus the Steel Wool games eras of Five Nights at Freddy's. I think the uncanny horror that initially attracted a lot of us to FNAF has kind of been left by the wayside. That's not fully Steel Wool's fault. I think it was already falling off like pretty immediately come like FNAF 3 into 4. Yeah, even in Sister Location, it came back a bit for Pizzeria Simulator with the salvage minigames. I think they're an excellent show form for that eerie early FNAF horror, but very little compares to FNAF 1 in that good uncanny valley horror, where it's not in your face, it's not directly scary, but it's just off-putting enough to make you feel uncomfortable. And that's really where FNAF shines, in my opinion. Frankly, it's why I'm always going to prefer the horror of FNAF 1 versus something like FNAF 4, because are the FNAF 4 animatronics like directly more scary looking than the FNAF 1 animatronics? By a long shot. They are purposely designed to look scary because they are nightmares, and that makes sense. But for me, it's a more satisfying and generally scarier game when it's not necessarily that the animatronics themselves are scary, but the way you see them in the restaurant puts you off and makes you uncomfortable. That's really what it is for me. Seeing them slowly approach your office, seeing them look at you in weird angles, that's that like FNAF 1 magic that we have really not gotten to. And to your point, that's really hard to replicate in the 3D space. So I genuinely think a lot of the reason that horror is missing from the current era of FNAF, or at least it's much, much lessened, is it's just hard to do eerie horror in a 3D space. It really is. Now, Help Wanted, I see your point with the way that Glitch Trap approaches you, but genuinely, I think the best shot they've had for horror in the Steel Wool era has been Secret of the Mimic. Ruin was there for a bit, but the more I look back on Ruin, the more I play it again, it feels more and more like Sister Location, in the sense that, like, on a first playthrough, Ruin's really, really good, but on subsequent playthroughs, you find out how much is very much the same, and it's just the same walking path with, like, a couple mini games along the way. So part of me is like, Ruin has lost its horror factor because of that for a decent point. Whereas Secret of the Mimic, it's still the same game, but the AI of the Mimic is so unpredictable that each area feels fresh no matter how many times you play it. You can't just do the same thing every single time. And I think the older suits we're not used to and the way they're presented do a really good job of uncanny horror. To the point where I think it's funny. Secret of the Mimic's actual jump scares are some of the weaker in the franchise, but Secret of the Mimic's environment jump scares you in a way that's better than most Steel Wool games we've gotten so far. I was reminded of that playing in VR recently, where, like, for a perfect example, the White Tiger area. Everyone talks about how scary the White Tiger area is. And as scary as the White Tiger area itself is, I think one of the understated parts about that section is how well done the hallways in between areas are. Because here you are with a light, so you can only see a couple feet in front of you, and you have to walk down a narrow hallway with alcoves. And every now and then, one of the alcoves has a messed up, decayed and rotting animatronic, not even animatronic, costumed suit. And they don't jump out at you. They don't scream at you. They don't make any noise. But having to walk in this dark hallway where you can only see a few feet in front of you, and then suddenly a few feet in front of you is a massive, like, rotted away face, that is a really, really effective jump scare in that FNAF 1 uncanny style, where it's not in your face, it's not jumping out, it's not screaming at you, it's something that will naturally happen in the environment, which gives you a pseudo jump scare. And I think that's really where Secret of the Mimic shines. One of the best examples of it is in the workshop, where there's all those stripped down versions of the suits, the moon maze that we see in the like post-game exploration. What else? What other areas? I mean, the Mimic in general is just a very good antagonist for that, where any suit at any time can just, like, wake up and then start looking for you. And that's done really, really well. I wish there was more areas that did that. We get, like, the showroom lobby, the workshop. I think the same thing can happen in, like, the main hub, but, like, and the retail showroom. But, like, other than that, it's very much like you're going up against a specific character, which lessens it a bit, in my opinion. But I do love the concept that, like, any one of these very creepy looking suits can just spring to life with the Mimic at any point. And that again really helps to sell the horror of this game and make it feel a lot more like a return to form of having that like genuine uncanny valley style of horror. How I would to address the second half of this question, if Suwa were to try and make a game fully embracing that, how do you think that should play out? I really think that Secret of the Mimic is that. I think that's them fully embracing that. As far as like what else they could do, I'm not a game designer, man. I really don't know. Because it's tough to make uncanny horror in a 3D space. It really is. Because the moment you can like look around and see different angles, the effect goes way down. It's why FNAF 1 is so effective with how simple it is. Because you can only see via the cameras, you can only see pre-made renders to make them look as creepy as possible. You know, like think about it, right? A perfect shot that like a lot of people are frightened of is the parts and service room where you click on it and Bonnie's face is at the camera, black eyes, white dots. Terrifying camera to see for the first time. If this was a 3D game and you could free roam and you see that on the camera and go, oh, that's scary. And you walk into the room and like, for the sake of the argument, we'll say like the webcam, the security camera's here. Bonnie's just like this in the corner. It's suddenly no longer funny. It's suddenly no longer scary, and it's suddenly very funny. So it's hard to make good uncanny horror in a 3D space. I don't blame them struggling on that. I think Secret of the Mimic was the best they've done it, and I hope that was a learning experience, and they'll continue in that area moving forward. Will they? I don't know. I do worry about. I heard that like sales numbers aren't great, so we'll see how it goes. I think the bad lesson that might get learned here is how well Security Breach sold versus how relatively not well Secret of the Mimic sold. But we'll see. Thank you for your question, Percy. And we are now going to be moving on to the email, of which I might need to get more because we're only 20 minutes in. And I only grabbed 2 email questions, so we might grab some more. But if you want your questions answered on the podcast via email, you can send them to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description to copy and paste because it's been typed down. Our first email comes from Megan, she, her. Quick question. If MXES is the same machine as F10N4, why doesn't it speak to us? M1 and Fiona spoke perfectly fine. So what do you think has changed? Maybe that's why Chico is repeatedly seen without her beak or voice box? Just kidding. ... Unless. Thank you for your question, Megan. So they're not. Short answer, I don't think that Fiona and MXES are the same machine. Or rather, they are the same machine. I just think there's 2 of them. One of them is F10N4, and one of them is MXES. Why do I think that? Well, the game tells us directly. When you're in Secret of the Mimic and you're playing, you access 2 terminals that are very similar. One of them is in MCM proper, and I believe it's number 2. So in Murray's Costume Manor, there is a terminal in Murray's Costume Manor and in Edwin's house. There are identical terminals in hidden rooms. Both of them are they're surveillance rooms, and both of them have a terminal. One of them says Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage number 1. The other one says Experimental Storage number 2. In Murray's Costume Manor, we find F10N4. That's where the Mimic schematics are apparently held, which is strange because like that would mean she has them and she doesn't. Regardless, in one of them the Mimic schematics are held, in the other one Cradle.exe is available to us. So F10N4 is a MXES console. Like, we can put them next to each other. They look identical. We know that she is a MXES console. However, carved into her is F10N4, not MXES. So, the fact that we have seen in Ruin a console that has MXES, and a console in Secret of the Mimic that says F10 and 4. And in this game, we have, again, mechanical, M, X Factor, X, experimental, E, storage, S, number 1, and experimental storage number 2. There's 2 MXES consoles. So I don't think we've met Fiona in the modern timeline yet. I think we found Cradle.exe, where the Mimic was being held, essentially. Which explains why, when we turn it off in Ruin, the very next thing we see is the Mimic starting to cause havoc again. So, yes, it was trapped in a room, but it was trapped in a room, and then the Cradle.exe MXES console was activated, keeping it even more locked away. In that way, I believe that the purple rabbit we see throughout Ruin is Cradle.exe, something that's seeking out the Mimic program and attempting to contain it. And I think that's why it attacks Cassie throughout the game, because we know that Helpy is on the Vanny mask, and Helpy seems to be Glitch Trap, which is a branch of the Mimic. So, MXES or Cradle.exe, when it hunts down Cassie using the mask, is kind of just doing its job. It's like, oh, Cassie's walking around, sure, I'll leave her be. Hey, what's in that mask? And then it starts running towards us, And what do you have there? Drop it. What do you have there? It's like a dog with something in their mouth. You have to be like, drop it. And that's kind of what's happening to Cassie in that. So to answer your question, MXES, I don't think it. Now, we don't know for certain, but for MXES and F10 and 4 to be the same machine, the fact that the game lists experimental storage twice has to mean nothing. And at some point in the timeline, someone saw F10 and 4, buffed out that engraving, and then newly engraved MXES over top of it for no reason. So I think it makes the most sense that they are just separate consoles. One of them is the one we find in Ruin, and one of them is the one we find in Secret of the Mimic. Likely, they're both in Secret of the Mimic. We just don't get to see the other one. We only see F10 and 4. That's my best guess. So thank you for your question, Megan. Our next question comes from Jordan. Him. I had a question on what you think the purpose of showing the white tiger is in Secret of the Mimic. Do you think it's to show a signal of, hey, I know we're focused on the Mimic, but there's still ghosts in this universe, not just in-game lore, or something else entirely? I'd personally like it reintroducing ghosts to where the David spirit takes over the M2 directive instead of it pretending to be David. Now it actually is. Thank you for your question, Jordan. I do think the white tiger is a ghost. I got some pushback. A lot of people go, well, it's the Mimic, because everything else in this game is the Mimic wearing a suit. But my counter arguments, I made a whole video about this, but my counter arguments are mainly that, one, while you're looking at the white tiger, its head can fully go to the side and you see its exposed neck. And I don't think the Mimic could do that without you seeing some endoskeleton. So that's one. And two, it acts like Golden Freddy. The white tiger acts almost identical to Golden Freddy, something that teleports around, something that, we're never quite sure what it is or how it's moving so quickly. And most damning, if you look at it too long, you die. You could look at the Mimic until the cows come home. If it doesn't see you, you're fine. But if you look at the white tiger too long, you have more and more flashes of something, of the white tiger getting closer and closer until you just die. And hey, wouldn't you know, but in the week before, the main method that, the main showy method that you get killed by Golden Freddy in that book is by looking at it. And your thoughts get melted over and you just die. So it feels like Golden Freddy. And in that way, it feels like a ghost. It's paranormal. It only really makes sense to be paranormal. Not to mention the fact that before we even see that suit, so it can't be a hallucination because we've never seen it before, Arnold sees the white tiger pop in front of his vision 2 separate times. One of them is backstage at the puppet show. One of them is on the way to the admin office. And I cannot stress enough that Arnold, to our knowledge, doesn't know what the white tiger is. So it's not just like he's sleep deprived and seeing his favorite character. He don't know what that is, which I would think imply that it's once again a ghost. Now, when I discussed, is the white tiger a ghost? My main theory for it was it's David. And I think that's most people think if it's a ghost, it's either David, or some people say it's Fiona because of the tape. We'll get there. My thinking for the white tiger being David's ghost is because it does kind of feel like it's playing. I don't get a lot of malice from the white tiger. It's menacing, it's horrifying, I get it. But we are in a dark basement. So a lot of things are. What's actually happening here? We enter a room, and then we're trying to leave the room, and the white tiger keeps chasing us down. What does it do when it kills us? Doesn't claw us, doesn't bite us. It picks us up, looks at us with one eye, and looks at us with the other eye. And then the jump scare ends. We don't get to see what happens after that. To me, all of this behavior feels like David playing. And the reason I say that is because when we first get there, all the white tiger does is occasionally pop in to get a look at us. You're like, hey, who's at my home? What's going on here? And then eventually we make it down to the tunnels underneath the basement. And that is where we encounter it. And suddenly it starts chasing us. Well, if this is where the white tiger spirit usually rests, we've entered his home. And now he wants to play. I genuinely think he's just playing hide and seek. I think he's trying to play chase. He's trying to play tag or whatever you want to say here. And, if the light is the safe spots, that's why he's not attacking us. Because we know for a fact, first of all, the white tiger can be in the light. We see it happen 2 times. So it's not like the light is actually protecting us here. I think it's David in his mind playing a game. You've come into my room. Let's play a game. I'm going to try to catch you. Light is a safe spot. Go. And then when he grabs us, why do we die? Maybe Arnold's heart gives out. He's like 37 hours sleep deprived. Being grabbed by a ghost and shook around a bit, he might just die there, to be honest. And I don't think David is trying to kill Arnold here. I think it's literally just David trying to be a kid and trying to play with a new friend that came over, and if he succeeds, he accidentally kills them, which he doesn't mean to do. As far as like where that goes story-wise, I could see it possessing the mimic. If it does, it doesn't happen while we play. It would have to be something that happened after the fact. Because in Secret of the Mimic proper, I don't see M2 as being possessed. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it makes much sense. So like if it's something that happens after the game, then I could see that. But I just don't know. So I mentioned Fiona though. That like some people think it's Fiona. The main logic there I've heard is that the white tiger was made by Fiona, and we have that audio log hidden away in the basement. The one where Edwin Murray believes he's speaking to Fiona with some sort of self-invented spirit box. I really like John FNAF's interpretation of this. That, if it's his invention, the mimic might already be in it. And we see the line that gets said is said previously in something recorded with a mimic-powered device near a Mycelium Men plushie, which is known for recording voices. And the idea that a robot will try to accomplish its goal in whatever way it sees fit, and, the mimic's whole shtick with the coffee maker was the whole... I'm completely rehashing this. Go watch the full video. I'll make sure to link it. It's a great theory. I really, really enjoy it. But the gist of the theory was the mimic was already trying to guess what Edwin wanted. And after Fiona died, and he keeps like talking into all these mimic devices about how much he misses her, the mimic goes, well, if he misses her, we'll just make it so that she's back again. So, he's in this basement that's already creepy. It already makes him feel uncomfortable. And then the mimic devices start playing Fiona's voice. And he thinks, instead of thinking, oh, the mimic devices are playing me Fiona's voice because it wants to try to cheer me up with it, he goes, oh, I'm spirit boxing. Oh, Fiona's ghost is here and is messing with the device to make her voice heard. Because I don't think Fiona Murray's ghost is here. If anything, it's at Fall Fest. It's not here. However, I don't even know if it remains, to be honest. However, I do think Edwin Murray in part built the mimic in an attempt to claim that soul back. Because this tape is in the room with all the mimic schematics and all the mimic prototypes. Like, it makes the most sense that Edwin Murray went into this creepy basement, thought he heard Fiona, and then started working to build her a body in the creepy basement. And eventually then we get M1. Who then goes on to copy Fiona's personality. And maybe Edwin genuinely thinks it's because Fiona's possessing the robot. Who knows? Who can say? But to him at that point, like, it's close enough. We did it. So I do like that idea. And then that, using that logic, if it is Fiona's spirit boxing down here, then it's the White Tiger. But I much prefer the John FNAF explanation of it's not actually Fiona's spirit down here, but Edwin thinks it is. I like that a lot. But so yeah, all in all, I do think the White Tiger is David's spirit. I don't know exactly why it's there. You might be right that it's just a matter of like, hey, don't worry, players. There's still supernatural stuff. It's not just all mimic. It might be that. It could be a couple things. But regardless, thank you for your question. And, you know, we made decent time. That's good enough. If you want your questions answered on the podcast, send them in to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description, copy and paste because it's pain to type out. But I'm tired. I got to pee. My Sims bars are low. So we're going to call this a podcast. So until next time, as always, thank you for watching the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, where the pizza abilities are endless. We hope to enjoy our future patronage. Bye-bye for now.